Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Training Students on Relationship Violence Prevention, an overview of the Escalation workshop developed by the One Love Foundation. This webinar is one of a series of free webinars during National Campus Safety Awareness Month. My name is Abigail Boyer, Associate Executive Director of Programs for the Cleary Center for Security on Campus. All participants are in listen-only mode, but we encourage you to interact with us by typing in questions and comments using the chat function. In addition, we're going to conduct a short survey at the end of the webinar, and we really appreciate your feedback so that we can continue to improve and provide you with the best possible information and resources. Finally, we'll record today's session, and you can receive a link to the recording during or in next week's National Campus Safety Awareness Month email. For those of you who may not be familiar, each September is National Campus Safety Awareness Month, designed to highlight how institutions can effectively prevent and respond to campus safety concerns and engage the campus community in a year-long conversation on how everyone can contribute to a safer campus community. This year's campaign, called Know More, Do More, aims to help campuses increase their knowledge around critical campus safety issues and then turn that knowledge into action on campus. So for us, partnering with the One Love Foundation was a natural fit, especially as campuses look to grow their prevention programs related to domestic and dating violence. I know we're receiving a lot of phone calls in that area, especially because of the most recent amendments to the Cleary Act. And so the Escalation workshop is just another valuable free resource. It's really an opportunity to do more around this issue. So as we go along, you're going to be seeing a number of different types of links and resources that will go into your chat function as well. So just keep an eye into that panel so that you can link and find out more information as we're talking. But first, let me share some more information about our presenters. Shauna Bruno is the Managing Director of Partnerships at One Love. She's a graduate from LaSalle University, and Shauna joined One Love in late 2014 with 10 years of fundraising and nonprofit experience. So thanks for joining us, Shauna.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Also joining us is Jacqueline Van Manen. Jacqueline is a program coordinator for education initiatives at the One Love Foundation. She's a graduate of Castleton University and New York University. Jacqueline has over 6 years experience working with victims of trauma in higher education and nonprofit settings. So thank you for joining us, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
I'll just quickly walk you through the agenda for today's program and then we'll get started. Shauna and Jacqueline are going to start by giving you some background about the One Love Foundation and the creation of the Escalation workshop. So what kind of drove us to the workshop that you're going to be seeing today or hearing more about today. We're going to watch the Escalation video, which is really the centerpiece of the workshop. And then after the video, Shauna and Jacqueline will talk about how the Escalation workshop is being adopted at institutions across the country. So you'll get to see a little bit more what this looks like in practice as campuses are bringing this particular workshop to their students. So as you could see from the agenda, there is going to be a question and answer session at the end of today's program. Especially as you watch the film, you might find that you have a number of different questions that come up, or as we're talking, those questions might come up. So feel free to submit questions as you think of them, and then we're going to address them all at the end. You can ask a question at any time during the program using that chat function. So let's get started with our program. Shauna, as the director of the One Love Foundation, it would be really helpful if you could start out just by giving our audience some background on the foundation's origins and goals.
Thanks, Abby, and thank you everyone at the Cleary Center for the opportunity to present information about the Escalation workshop today. Just a little bit of history about One Love. The One Love Foundation, in honor of Yardley Reynolds Love, more commonly known as just the One Love Foundation, was created in 2010 after Yardley, a senior at the University of Virginia, was beaten to death by her ex-boyfriend, also a UVA student. After her death, her family and friends were shocked to learn the statistics, that 1 in 3 women will be in a violent relationship in her lifetime, and 1 in 4 men will be in a violent relationship in his lifetime, and that young women ages 16 to 24 are at 3 times greater risk. They realized that had Yardley's friends, coaches, teachers, and family been better educated, the outcome might have been different. Today, our focus is dedicated to educating young people on campuses across the country about relationship violence through our powerful technology-based tools that capture students' hearts and minds. Our goal is to educate, empower, and activate students in a community-based movement to change the statistics and ultimately save lives. Sharon Love, Yardley's mom, talks about how One Love wants to do for relationship violence what Mothers Against Drunk Driving did for drinking and driving: stigmatize the behavior and teach bystanders to take away the keys.
And I think that's such a great comparison and such a useful way to talk about it. Jacqueline, can you tell us a little bit about the format of the escalation workshop and how it was developed?
Sure. The Escalation Workshop is 90 minutes long and consists of 3 components. First, we educate through the use of the film Escalation, which you will see today, which provides an example of an abusive relationship. Next, we empower students through a guided discussion, which uses the film to explore the warning signs of relationship violence and really empowers young people to start talking about relationship violence and also talking about healthy relationships and what they look like. And lastly, we activate students, encouraging them to take action and get involved in a movement against relationship violence. And the film is based on research and real stories of relationship violence. And the manual was created by prevention experts to prepare non-experts to hold the conversation after the film.
That's really helpful background on the workshop, and I love that idea of really taking something from learning more and then really empowering students and members of the community to do more. It's right in line with some of the things that we've been looking at and exploring through National Campus Safety Awareness Month. So as we look at that background on the program and the development, just like to learn a little bit more information or have our audience learn a little bit more about who facilitates the workshop at an institution. So is it just students? Do you have administrators sometimes on board for this? And how do these facilitators get training to conduct the workshop? So could I just go out and facilitate one after watching the film today, or is there a different process?
Sure, yeah. So we train students to facilitate the escalation workshops with their peers. We ultimately believe that a peer-to-peer conversation is the most beneficial in terms of really opening up this to talk about relationship violence. Although we do train administrators as well, so they can help to play more of a supportive role or help with some of the initial rollout to get more students involved. The training is an hour long and can be done either in person during a campus visit or via Skype, Google Hangout, or a conference call. And before the training, we send everybody a copy of the film and our manual for review. And the discussion manual includes information, including just a little bit more about how to be a discussion leader, what this really entails as to actually being this kind of facilitator. And then it also includes 20 questions having to do with the content of the film, which is paired with teaching points, which really provide the educational component that we believe that students really should learn about. And so that's what the facilitator is sharing and doing during that workshop. And we require that anybody that is going to be distributing the workshop be trained as a facilitator through this 1-hour training.
Which is fantastic. So it's giving them the tools to do this, but also making sure that they have some ideas on, how can I effectively facilitate this? What are some things that I need to think about in terms of the types of conversations that could come out of this? So before we, start moving into the video portion of the webinar, can you just speak a little bit to cost? So what is the cost to institutions who would choose to adopt the escalation workshop and have their facilitators trained?
So the escalation workshop, the training and curriculum are offered completely free of charge. We do many campus visits, especially with some of the funded regions that we've been working with. And we also can do trainings via Skype, conference call. I do a lot of work with students over the internet, so having Google Hangouts with them and things like that. So we are very virtual. And we are offering this, again, completely free of cost, but we do accept donations to help to push this curriculum forward and help to build this movement to be even bigger than we can ever imagine.
Great. I think that's something we hear quite a bit from institutions who are really looking that they want to have, powerful programs, but they're also looking at the cost that it takes to implement them. So it's always exciting when you can see a free resource and really explore whether that's a good fit for your campus. So we are going to take some time to watch the escalation video, but before we do that, Jacqueline, can you just cue it up and give us, any background information you think is helpful to think about?
Yeah, before we begin, I would just like to give a trigger warning. The film that you're about to watch portrays physical violence, sexual violence, emotional violence, and some extreme scenes. So if at any point you feel uncomfortable or triggered, you can feel free to, maybe take some time out to process that, get a drink of water. You can opt out of the webinar, that's okay. We feel like, this is obviously really important to make sure that you're in touch with your local resources, especially if you're going to be in this role of distributing the workshop. So becoming more familiar with them and knowing where to turn to for either yourself or any students that might need to process this after seeing the film. And I also do want to note that the film portrays one example of relationship violence, and while it shows a white heterosexual college-age couple portraying male on female violence, I think it's really important to understand that this type of violence can happen in many types of relationships, no matter the gender, the sexuality, the race, or the class of folks involved, and that this film is really used as a catalyst to start a conversation about relationship abuse in many different types of relationships. And even when I'm talking with students, I like to mention the fact that this happens sometimes within families, and some of these behaviors even happen in friendships and between friends. So let's just keep that in mind as we watch the film and consider bringing this to your school.
All right, so we're going to get started, go back into our webinar. Hopefully you had a chance. It looked like most of you had the chance to finish the film. If not, you can certainly loop back and maybe finish those final minutes if you had to come into the webinar a little bit later, you didn't get the opportunity. I have to say that every time we watch the film, it's difficult, and even though the film is incredibly well done, we know it's certainly not easy to watch. And so one of the things that always really impresses upon me and certainly others that have watched it is just the fact that relationship violence is something that can happen to anyone. And I think the video really does a nice job of showing the subtle and confusing signs of an unhealthy relationship. So, Jacqueline, I know that you've been helping institutions adopt the escalation training program. So once participants watch the video, what's been the reaction to it? And can you take us through some of the guided discussions that you have with students after they watch the film?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, after we screen the film with students, we start a guided discussion based on 20 questions, and that's having to do with the warning signs of relationship violence. And really, students' initial reactions are that they find the film extremely powerful and that they report that it's eye-opening, but it's also deeply recognizable. So that really tells us that students see these behaviors all the time, yet they might not have considered these behaviors to be abusive before seeing the film. And so the discussion portion of the workshop, which includes 20 questions, takes students through each scene of the film in order to dissect what happened and why each character acted the way that they did, what the warning signs of abuse were, why a bystander maybe didn't step in, and what all players in that scene could have done, and how it really relates specifically to students' lives on campus.
So there's so many different layers to that, and I know certainly within this space we can't recreate the structure of the film or the structure of the workshop itself, but Jacqueline, could you talk briefly about some of the different ways that institutions are implementing the workshop? How are they bringing this to their campus?
Yeah, absolutely. So every school has a different campus culture. We obviously know that, and that's why we work individually with each campus. We work with students, administrators, oftentimes a collaborative effort between those parties to find a distribution plan that's really best for them. So many colleges choose to make the workshop mandatory for groups like athletes or Greek life or residence life, before expanding to other groups on campus. And we think that that's a really great model. So for example, Duke University held workshops with all student athletes by holding 3 workshops over a 2-day period. So these were really large-scale workshops in which students all came together to watch the film, and then they broke up into discussion groups. And we recommend that the discussion groups be anywhere from about 10 to 30 students with a facilitator assigned to each. Jacksonville University is another great example of a school that adopted this program, and they've used the workshop in their JU 101 course, which is required for all freshmen. And so that's a really great way to ensure over time that all students on your campus have participated in the workshop. And we talked a little bit earlier about how this workshop really is designed to educate, empower, and activate young people. And so we're really focused on activating a movement against relationship violence. And so so many schools have created what we're calling Team One Love, which is a way that students can really signal their personal desire to be part of the movement to end relationship violence, starting with a really deep involvement in their own campus community. So Team One Love is charged with helping to distribute the escalation workshops, and also helping us out with some campaigns that we're starting up for this new school year, and also creating new content, because ultimately we believe that students know their population the best.
That makes great sense. And I know, a lot of what you've been talking about is in relation to colleges and universities, but I believe you've mentioned that some K-12 institutions are using the escalation workshop as well. So can you tell me a little bit about the program for K-12 or how that might differ?
Yeah, absolutely. So many high schools have adopted the workshop, and really each school chooses which grades to hold the program with. The most common adoption we've seen is that schools have held the workshops with juniors and seniors, especially as part of college prep and things like that. And we're also currently developing a parents' workshop so parents can learn about how to have these important conversations with their children.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so I'm noticing there are a couple of questions and answers coming in, or a couple of questions. Hopefully you will provide the answers coming in. But before we break, Shauna, can you tell us how an institution that's listening and is interested in adopting the escalation workshop can go about implementing it on their campus before we get to some of the questions?
Yes, we can actually accept emails directly to escalation@joinonelove.org. That's JOINONELOVE.org. And you can also call us at 1-844-TEAM, the number 1LV.
Great, excellent. And a couple of folks, I know we had a few that had to jump on the webinar a little bit late, so we have a couple of people asking about financial commitments. So would you mind reiterating that before we get to some of the other questions?
Sure, absolutely. And so right now we're working with colleges across the country to help to distribute the workshops, and we're offering the curriculum, the training, all the workshops, and also follow-up assistance completely free of charge, because ultimately, we don't want any kind of financial burden to exist for folks to be able to receive this education. And so I'll work, either me or one of the other program coordinators will work with you one-on-one to help to make a plan for training and distributing these workshops on your campus, and also for greater involvement through Team One Love. We'll be offering that completely free of charge. We do a lot of work virtually, but we do often travel to certain regions of the country. And of course, we accept donations to help to fund our work to ensure that we can get to as many schools as possible.
So some of the other questions, we have a number of different questions coming in, so I'm just going to go through a few of them, and we're going to take some time. I know we're at the 2 o'clock mark now, but we are going to take some time to try to to finish a few more of these questions. So for those of you who are able to stay on the line, if you have questions yourself, please feel free to do so. One of the questions that came in is the capacity needed to conduct the webinar. So can you talk a little bit about what you recommend institutions to be able to successfully implement this in terms of capacity?
Yeah, and so we recommend holding these workshops either in a large scale or a smaller scale format. So I'll go through each one of those. So the large scale format is where you actually bring a large group of students together. So say multiple athletic teams or multiple fraternities and sororities. And we recommend actually setting up chairs in circles of groups of no larger than 30 or so. Where students actually will be assigned to a group. They will all watch the film on their own, or all watch the film as a group together, and then they'll actually be in their discussion groups and ready to go right after the film ends. So this way you don't have to travel to a different location to have the discussion or things like that. And so that model has worked really successfully, especially within athletic programs, bringing together multiple teams and actually having all the discussions right there in the same room with a facilitator with each group. Or you can go on a more smaller scale. So if you wanted to just assign one facilitator to one sports team or one residence hall, where you bring together a group of students no larger than, we'd say, about 30 students, where everybody watches the film together and then has the discussion. But the workshop should always follow the format of everybody watches the film together in the same room. We have the 40-minute guided discussion afterwards, and then 10 minutes spent on activating the Team One Love movement on your campus.
So it sounds like in terms of capacity, it would really go back to what are the size of the groups that you're looking to conduct and how do you do that in a way that's useful and can kind of lend itself to some of the conversations that are so needed around this film. A lot of the other questions that are coming in really tie to that. So one of the questions is, you know, in terms of all we saw in the film, what are some signs that we would give or that we could give students to look for if they think a friend is being abused? So is that something that the workshop addresses, or what are some of those pieces that might be addressed in connection with this film?
Yeah, so the main mission of the workshop itself is to really understand some of those warning signs that people can really speak up about. And so we go through a lot of different warning signs to take a look at. I mean, I think it's obvious to students that when a relationship gets to be physically violent, that's a very obvious warning sign. But really, there's a lot of signs that exist before that that you can really think about. So thinking about things like how quickly the relationship starts and how serious it gets. You know, oftentimes survivors of intimate partner violence will look back on their relationship and say, oh, it got really serious really fast. Or thinking about, you know, your friends and how much they can really play a role in how you decide to get close to someone, and knowing that friends should, you know, really be open and honest with you about how a relationship's going. And then we talk about other signs that you saw in the film, including chases, incessant texting, and about setting boundaries, not only with your partner, but also with friends and other folks that you're in communication with about how often you want to stay in touch. And so we really go through a lot of those kind of more subtle signs as we go through this conversation to talk about, you know, what to keep an eye out for, and recognizing that there's a lot of things that exist before a relationship gets to a physically abusive level, or, you know, understanding that not everything that we're going to see is necessarily going to be what we associate to be relationship violence, at least before seeing this film.
Absolutely. Some of the other questions that are coming in are really tied to campus process. So one of the things that folks are wondering if the workshop would address, or how a campus might address, is in a case of a person getting out of an abusive relationship safely, what might happen to the abuser both on campus and legally to protect the male or female or person that was abused. So can you give me a sense of, you know, how campuses might be trained to navigate those types of questions in relation to escalation?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, one thing that we mentioned multiple times in the workshop is how the breakup is really the most dangerous time in that type of relationship, and how important it is to make sure that you carry that breakup out in a safe and planned way. And so we think it's really important for facilitators to be sharing the resources that exist on each campus about, how to reach out to somebody, if you're thinking that you're going to be breaking up with a partner or if you need support through that. Also remembering that just because a breakup happens doesn't necessarily mean that, that person is going to be safe. That really friends and all their support networks really have to be in touch with them and keeping lines of communications open to ensure that they're safe. And while we provide a lot of educational content when it comes to those specific policies and resources, we welcome each school to really make sure that they can tailor fit this to their campus resources, to their population. So, we provide that educational content, but we also talk with colleges about the best way to ensure that students become more aware of the services and resources provided on their campus.
Great. So that campus may be able to hone in more specifically on things like no contact orders, if they have that on their campus, or if they have a protection from abuse order, however it's labeled within their particular state. That's one of the things that a campus can really specify to what does this mean for our particular campus community. So it looks like in terms of questions, we're wrapping up. Some of the other questions coming in are specific, and I love to see this, of how their particular campus or how an individual campus might be able to implement this workshop, or what it might mean in relation to some of the other programming that they're doing on campus. So I'm actually going to go to this slide with the information on how to contact One Love, because that's a really great opportunity to reach out and be able to say, here's what we're doing. We'd love to learn more in terms of how escalation might be a part of that. So that contact information on the screen is the best way to be able to follow up with them directly and really learn more about how it might be implemented on your own campus. So as we get to the end of our webinar, I want to say thank you so much to Shauna Bruno and to Jacqueline Van Manen for your time today, for giving us the opportunity to preview the film and learn a little bit more about this program on campus. We hope that you found the program informative, and we hope that you'll reach out to them if you have other questions, or if this is something that seems like it's going to be a good fit for your own institution. We've also plugged into the chat area a link to our webinar evaluation. So we do a number of different webinars, as you know, throughout the year, and so we want to get a sense of what you're looking for, what's been helpful, the type of structures you appreciate, and what you'd like to see coming down the pike. In addition to that, on the screen you also have information as to how you can follow up with the Cleary Center directly regarding feedback on the webinars or anything else that you'd like to see, as well as other resources that are available. So as we mentioned a little bit earlier, if you've not had the opportunity to sign up for our No More Do More campaign for National Campus Safety Awareness Month, please take the time to do that. You'll get a number of different free resources, and certainly it will connect you with resources like the webinar has today that can be implemented for free on your campus and really explore how to turn some of this knowledge into action. We're also doing a 10% discount for our Cleary Center Collaborative Program for those that are interested in looking further into that through the month of, or during, I should say, the month of September. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for your time and your attention to the webinar. We really appreciate you spending that time with us this afternoon. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, and you can download the handouts, and I hope many of you have had the opportunity to do so in your control panel. So you can download those webinar slides and the One Love Escalation overview, so that if you have additional questions or ideas that come up after the fact, that you'll have the opportunity to do that. So again, thank you so much for your time today, and we hope you have a